Hey you! Yes, person watching this, do you ever need help drawing shoes? I'm assuming you do, because you clicked on this video, and if you don't, you're a liar. I constantly get asked if I can make a shoe tutorial, so here it is. I don't know how helpful it'll be, but I'll give it a go. Hello, and welcome back to my channel. Hope you're doing well. It's finally time for the shoe tutorial. I know you guys have been waiting a while. Like a long while, but I'm finally here to do this. I was planning out the tutorial before filming, and I realized it's going to be much harder than all of the other tutorials, because for hands, it's like, okay, here's how I break it down, and then for hair, it's like, here's how I break it down. Same with anatomy. Shoes are a lot harder for me to explain, because at this point, it's something that I just kind of do, but I think I have some helpful tips for you. At least I think, maybe. I don't know. It's up to you guys to let me know if that's the case, but as always, the first two steps of any tutorial of mine is to practice and use reference pictures. You can watch a million tutorials online, but if you don't actually practice and take everything that you're learning and put it into use physically with your hands and a pencil, then you're not going to get better at drawing, because it's how it works. Drawing, the only way you can get better at it is by doing it. And of course, references. Draw what you see, not what you know. You might think you know what a shoe looks like, or anything else for that matter, but you probably don't. There's a lot that you're probably forgetting about a shoe, so references. On the topic of references, something that I did that was really helpful when I first started to wanting to improve shoes. Did that make any sense? When I first started wanting to improve the way I drew shoes, I got one of these. I'm sure you've seen one of these before. You get them in the mail. I don't know how they get there, but I get them in the mail sometimes. And this is very helpful because they have a bunch of different kinds of shoes. Now they have a lot of like pretty much every single page is kind of like a repeat of shoes. So like a lot of these look very similar, but they have pretty large amount of shoes and also stuff like this. I would say the one downside of these is that they don't come in a lot of different angles, but this is very helpful if you want to practice drawing different types of shoes. If you don't have one of these, it's no big deal. You can very much easily just find these online, but that is just what I did, so I thought that I'd throw that in there. So let's actually get to drawing. These plants are in the way. Sorry guys, you gotta go. Boom. Take our handy dandy ballpoint pens or anything that you want to use to draw. So normally I will say to break things down into shapes. The thing is with shoes is that I don't really do that. So here's what I do. I don't exactly break down the shapes of the shoes. I mostly just draw a foot and then I draw the foot wearing a shoe, I guess. I'm gonna show you guys kind of different shoes that I draw normally because of how many different types of shoes. I can't possibly go over every type of shoe in this video, but I'll try and get through as many as I can, or at least ones that I draw pretty often and stuff that I see other people drawing pretty often. When I draw a foot, it's so weird drawing a foot without a body. Who does that? We're just going to have this shape. That's the bottom of the leg. Pretend it's the bottom of the leg. I don't really have a shape for this ankle bone, but I do always draw the ankle bone. You can see the ankle bone pretty prominently on both sides of the foot, so regardless of the angle, I always draw at least one. Now there are three main shapes that I kind of use to draw feet, and that's this like sort of trapezoid shape, and then this is like the top of the foot triangle shape over here, which is the heel, and then this, I don't even know what kind of shape. What's it? Like a this shape. And then you can imagine the big toe being here, and then the rest of the toes. You don't need to draw toes if you're going to drawing shoes unless it's like sandals or something. I know, the reason I do this instead of breaking down the shapes of the shoes is because shoes can come in all sorts of different shapes and sizes. It really depends on the style of the shoe, the cut of the shoe, the fit of the shoe, how thick the sole and heel is, and stuff like that. There's just a lot that goes into it, so I find it a lot easier to just break down the shape of the foot. And especially if I don't know what kind of shoe I'm going to be drawing, this way I can just do whatever. So that's what you guys should keep in mind. Trapezoid, triangle, parallelogram. I know shapes, I'm an artist. And then with this, you kind of just use these same shapes for all sorts of different angles. I guess I'll go over sneakers first because those are like the most common type of shoe. But again, different shapes and sizes. So we'll draw our little foot guy. After you kind of pay attention to shoes a little bit more, you can kind of start stylizing them a little bit. So for me, I love to draw big chunky soles on the shoe. So let's see. Let's start with like a Converse type shoe. Converse are pretty tight against the foot, so there isn't going to be a lot of, like, you're not going to stray away too far from this basic foot shape. You're just basically adding things to it. So what does a Converse look like? I'm glad you asked. There's like that white toe part. Then it depends on what kind you have, but there's like ankle cut ones. So I guess to show you a variety, we'll go for the ankle cut ones. So you go to where the ankle bone is and just make like a little dip. And then the tongue of the shoe reaches all the way down the middle. There's nothing fancy. 2 lines and then a thing. It's like a hot air balloon. And again, since this is a more form-fitting type of shoe, we're not straying from these shapes like at all, really. It's basically just flush against the foot that we drew. The way you draw shoelaces can kind of change. I tend to picture them as being like a ribbon. So you could like let's say this is a shoe, right? You could just go like this, and that's fine, but I like to go the little extra mile and just, instead of a single line, make it like I said, more of like a ribbon, so it's a 3-dimensional shape. In terms of like the actual, this part of the laces, there's always one right here at the bottom. There's a bunch of different ways to lace your shoes, but there's 2 main ways that I normally draw them. I'll show the first one here and then the second one on the next one, and that's basically just this. It's just a little rectangle boys. Let's take a different color and add more of the more fancy bits. I think one thing that people get really nervous about when it comes to drawing shoes is to making them like look real big and chunky, but I love big chunky shoes. So I say go for it. We kind of just outline these laces for what we have. There's usually like a, oh my god, what's it called? Phineas and Ferb wrote a song about it. So here we have a shoe, but it can kind of look a little plain. So now that we have this like basic, like it looks like a shoe kind of thing going on, now you could pay attention to all of the smaller details, I don't know what that word just was, but the smaller details to make it jazzy. So the first thing I'm going to say is seams. A lot of people tend to not pay attention to the seams in shoes, which for the longest time, neither did I, because it's not something that you really think about, but it's something that I love to draw. And so just, again, take a reference photo and then just look at the seams of a shoe and just where they typically are. So there's normally one right here, and there's normally one right along this edge. There's one like right here. There's usually some, at least one, around the tongue, and then there's some around the ankle. If we were to draw the back of the shoe, oh god, it's my bed, but it's fine. There's also normally this thing going on, like the back part. I don't know what it's for, what purpose it serves. It serves in shoemaking, but that's normally there, and then there's normally seams there. So those are some seams, and then there's also normally, like on Converse at least, there's like a tag on the tongue that has like the brand. Sometimes there's a stripe. In terms of like designing a shoe, I'm not really gonna go over that because that's more of like a character design thing rather than a how to draw thing. I'm still planning on making like updated character design process thing, so I'll get to this eventually. But for now, especially if you are just getting into drawing shoes, I would recommend not really worrying about designing your own shoes and then just drawing shoes that you see. Everyone has shoes, so take your favorite pair of shoes and draw them. So if we have another type of sneaker, like this is one type, right? We also have more like kind of a little bit of chunkier ones. These ones also look a little chunky because it's me and I'm incapable of drawing shoes that aren't chunky. But what kind of other shoes do we have? Sometimes they're not ankle cut, sometimes they go over the ankle, so there's like a thing there. Again, love big chunky soles. I should learn how to speak at some point. I think that would be really beneficial to me in my life. Again, there's usually the tongue. When it comes to more high top sneakers, the tongue normally doesn't extend much higher than this like cushion part that's typically found at the ankle. I always tend to draw this toe part anyway, even if it's not on a Converse, just because even if a lot of it ends up getting erased later, it helps to place these sort of folds, which is something found in many a sneaker shoelaces. And then the other way that one might lace shoes is like the crisscross thing, like I did there. So what I would recommend, just to keep it consistent throughout the entire shoe, draw one of, like, just draw one direction in its entirety, and then go back and add the other ones. Boom, detail time. Shoelaces. For the knot, I don't really do anything too fancy. It's literally just like, kind of like 2 teardrop shapes, and then I'll like add a little shading to one, and then that's how I make the knot in the middle. I don't know if that's what a knot actually looks like, but it gets the job done. And so then that's what I do, and then you would just draw the laces. I always make like, I tend to gravitate towards square shapes in my drawings. I don't know why, I just like to draw them, so that's why they're very square here, and then I'll shade in this one. But if you like more rounded shapes, you could definitely change those. Again, not all shoes are the same thing, of course. Words of wisdom from me. So some shoes might not even have laces. They might have buckles, they might have velcros. You can do whatever you want. The world is your oyster. Even with sneakers, but I think most sneakers have laces, so. Another thing you can add, which Converse also have, it's like a tag that you can like, I don't know if it's what it's actually meant for, but I always put my finger through the little loop and I pull it on my foot. I don't know if that's what the intention is, but that's what I always use them for. And then again, a lot of sneakers tend to have similar seams to them, but also, here's the thing. You can use seams. It's like a way to sort of design your shoes and make them just stand out a little bit more. Like one thing that I do very often is I'll add some seams here. In terms of the bottom of the sneaker, I legit don't draw them, and if I do, they literally, how can I show? I usually start with this thicker part for the sole. I'll kind of talk about this a little bit more later in the video. I add a lot of details to the bottom of my shoes. They literally just look like this for the most part. Literally like an oval and then an oval. And then that's it. I think part of it is for balance reasons, but also it can sometimes just depend on what shoe I'm drawing. So for sneakers, I normally leave it blank like this. If I'm drawing the bottom of a boot, I'll usually go in and add those details a little bit more, just because that's something I tend to associate more with boots, even though sneakers totally have them. I don't know, it's just a personal choice that I make. Alright, so we got those sneakers. There's other types of sneakers, but here's 2 types of sneakers. Look at your own sneakers, go crazy. I draw boots quite often, so I think that's something to go over. Again, a lot of boots look different from one another, so I'm probably just gonna make something up. Kind of like when you pay attention to all the different things in a shoe, like laces versus buckles versus velcros, and then like where the seams are. Those are ways that you can kind of like design your own shoes, I guess, to make them a little bit more unique, because you can mix and match things. You can play with you can play with sole thicknesses, you can play with heel thicknesses. So let's give this one a little bit of an extra heel. For that, you literally just angle the foot up a little bit more. Like you just have the heel placed a little bit higher than the toes versus in these ones. So for the sole, literally just the same thing, just extend it a little bit. If you're drawing a boot with a little bit of heel, the sole can look a little different. It's like we have our foot, right? That looks a little weird, but it's, you get the point. The heel, the line, like if you have like the 4 here, this line's going to be just a little bit longer. And there's always usually like a gap, kind of like that shape. That's a very exaggerated version, and then like the more, it can be higher, it can be lower, whatever you want. And then also if you're drawing it kind of like from this angle again, and then you would kind of like cut that shape in on the side, extend that heel, and then you would just follow that same shape, but this way. And then there you have it, a shoe sole. This one looks a little whack, but again, you get the point. And then from this angle, you just keep this shape in mind is what I am trying to say. So instead of just drawing it here, it would dip up a little bit, it would dip down a little bit. This angle, you have to keep that in mind, so it wouldn't be a straight across thing. And then there would be this part down here. Let's say instead this one has buckles. If your shoe is a lot more form-fitting, like let's say for this one, like if we look at this shoe, it's more of a high top boot. The material is thicker because it is a boot, but it's also like more form-fitting. So there would be like a little bit of bunching up around the ankle, because this is where it's like bending and forming. If this specifically about shoes is something that you need help with, I would actually recommend going and watching my clothing tutorial. Obviously, clothes and shoes are different, but I do talk about material and what kinds of materials bend certain ways and different kinds of folds, and those things can also be applied to shoes. So I would recommend going to that video if you want a little more in-depth explanation. I'll leave that in the iCard for you. Have fun with that. You can also play around with like the toe of the shoe. I normally go for these more like rounded toes, but you can also have more square toes or like a pointy triangle toe. If you're doing that, I would recommend like drawing a shape, like let's say we draw like a little square. Instead of just following the shape and the curve of the toe, you would more make things start coming in to that center point. If this is a buckle, let's say we have a buckle in the middle, this is something where I would break it down into shapes. So for a buckle, it's like I always start with a square, and then there's this like really stretched out oval, and then you kind of trace the inside, but then instead of tracing the entire thing, you kind of cap it off. You can add more buckles if you want to get real anime with it. Yeah, again, you can play around with seams. Let's say we have a seam or 2 or 3 right down the middle. There are boots that have laces. There are boots made of thinner material. So again, just play around with it. That's what's so tricky about this tutorial versus the other tutorial, because it's like even if things vary and even if stylistic choices can be made, at the end of the day there's still like some rules that you should keep in mind. But then for shoes, it's like there's so many different kinds of shoes, there's so many different looks of shoes, it's a lot harder to give a tutorial on them. So I don't even know if anything I'm saying is helpful, but it's okay, it's totally fine. Oh yeah, another thing I forgot before I continue. Another thing that boots typically have, I'll add these like kind of stripes, and then these will, I guess we could leave that, that's like a tag. And this is just kind of like the pattern of like the sole kind of peeking out from the side. I know this is kind of small, so I'll go over what I'm doing in a minute. You just add these lines. I like to space them out a little bit, and then when you outline it, each time there's this, you would make like a curve like that, and then sometimes I'll shade it in, it depends on what I'm doing. There's that. Okay, flats are the next thing I have lined up. My tripod is in the way. I can't move this anymore. God damn it. I really do be like this sometimes. I think flats are probably the easiest type of shoe to draw. Out of all of the shoes, flats have like the least amount of actual shoe to them. So most flats, super simple. There's like this like U shape. You can also make it a V shape. That my U's and V's literally look the same. You can make it a V shape if you want, but it's pretty common that there's a U shape. Follow the form of the shoe. Most flats tend to be very form-fitting. Seams tend to be around here. There might be some in the middle, might be some on the side. Do whatever you want. Sometimes there's like an ankle thing, or there's like a buckle that will go around the foot just for some extra security. Those are more of like a different style of shoe, but still pretty similar to flats. I think that's about all I can say about flats, honestly. It's literally just take what you have for sneakers and then get rid a lot of it, and then there's flats. But moving on. Oh no, my coaster is in the way. How dare I be hydrated? Like, actually, wait, let me go over sandals, because they're also pretty similar to flats. So the main part for sandals is typically the sole. Flip-flops are incredibly easy. If you're drawing a flip-flop, it's literally just like the sole and then 2 little lines like that, and then it's a flip-flop. For sandals, there's a couple different types of sandals. There's like gladiator sandals, there's like dad sandals. There's like sandals that are kind of like flip-flops where it's like this, but then you have like stuff up here and stuff here. So again, just like freaking lose it. Sandals typically have buckles on them, so I'd recommend going for that, but I've also seen sandals where they'll have like one big lace and you like tie it around your foot. Sandals are one of the things where they can just really vary, so I'd recommend just looking into it. And then also you have to learn how to draw toes. Okay, heels for real. To be honest, I think this is like the type of shoe that I'm least confident in drawing, which I should get confident because the main character in my soon-to-be webcomic has high heels, but the easiest way to break down drawing heels is from the side. And the main way that I would do that really just take the basic shapes of the foot and just put them at an angle. So instead of drawing a foot like this, it would be more like this. The toes would be kind of flat, this would be up, and then the heel would be up here. And then like the more higher up you make the heel, the higher the heels will be. Pretty self-explanatory. If I'm sketching things out really roughly and I know I'm going to be drawing heels, sometimes I'll draw the foot as like a triangle, and then I can like break it down from there. Again, heels are another thing where they vary a lot. They can look very different. If you're drawing a heel from the front, it would kind of just look like they're standing on their toes. So if you are drawing a person wearing heels positioned like where their foot is positioned in the front, I'd recommend drawing the other foot kind of more at an angle so it looks like your character is wearing heels and not that you don't know how to draw feet. The heels can definitely be the trickiest for me to draw, especially if it's like a back angle. The shit can get weird. And again, you can have a bunch of different looking stuff. You can have boots that are heels, and then you would just take like these things of drawing heels and these things of drawing boots and you smush them together and you get these. If you are very new to drawing shoes, I would recommend avoid drawing angles like this just until you start to get the hang of it. And then once you feel a little more confident in drawing shoes from like these very typical 3/4 angle or like a side view, then you can move on to drawing these. But a very quick tip I can give about drawing shoes and just feet in general, if you're drawing them from more of these angles, draw the soles first. It makes it so much easier. Now if you have something like a heel, that can be a little bit more complicated because there's more shapes within the sole of the shoe. But if I'm drawing like a sneaker or something, or like a boot, they usually, again, they start off as like those oval shapes, and then how wide they are really depends on what angle that they're at. So like if it's more from this angle, you would see a lot more of the top of the shoe, but then if it's more from this angle, you'd see a lot less. But I would basically just draw those oval shapes, and then on this side, thicken it up a little bit, and then this is the entire sole of the shoe. And then from there, you build your regular shoe shapes and foot shapes and all of that. It can seem a little weird, especially at first, because it's literally the opposite of how you draw feet from any other angle, but it takes a little bit of practice, but this is the most helpful tip I can give for drawing shoes at an angle. Of course, the number one tip I have for drawing anything do you like how I wrote it in cursive this time? Practice! You can sit here and watch this video over and over and over again. You can go and watch other shoe tutorials and watch those over and over and over again. You will never get better at drawing shoes unless you actually put it to practice and you take your pen or your pencil or whatever the hell you like to draw with and you physically draw shoes. Now it can take you 2 days, it can take you 2 years. It really depends on how often you practice, how much of a fast learner you are, and a bunch of other stuff. But just don't let it frustrate you because it took me so long to be able to draw shoes. Shoes are definitely one of the things that I'm more confident in, but even then there's still room for improvement. There's always room for improvement. And the only way that I was able to get this far is by practicing for many years. So even after this tutorial, if you're still not confident in the way you're drawing shoes and you're still having trouble, don't let that discourage you. Just keep drawing shoes. Someday it'll click. And if I said anything in this video that made it click for you, give this video a thumbs up, and feel free to leave any comments below if there's any helpful tips that you have for drawing shoes that you think I left out in this video. I'm definitely not a master at drawing shoes, and again, with every tutorial, I don't want anyone to take this and think this is the way to draw shoes. This is just how I draw shoes. You can take all of this video, you can take bits of this video, you can take one thing from this video. Don't think that this is the one and only way to do it. Feel free to adapt into your own ways. Yeah, if you're new here, hello, my name is Oliver. I make a lot of art. I'll sometimes make tutorials like this, but I'll also share a lot about my original I was going to say characters and stories at the same time. I share a lot of my original characters and my original stories. I also draw fan art. Sometimes I'll just sketch in my sketchbook for fun. We have a lot of fun over here, at least I like to think so. So if you're new here, consider subscribing. I would really, really appreciate it. And you can also follow me on social media. Those will be linked on screen, not on screen. They will be linked in the description box, but they will be on screen. But there will be linked on screen some videos for you to check out, and there will also be some in the iCard for you. I'd really appreciate it. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next week. Bye.